Imagine this. At the height of World War II, British scientists seriously considered building aircraft carriers out of ice. Yes, colossal floating icebergs, reinforced with wood pulp, armed with squadrons of planes. It sounds like science fiction, and yet, for a moment in history, it was a genuine military project, a frozen fortress meant to patrol the seas. And while we fall asleep tonight in the safety of warm beds, millions back then curled up in cold bunkers and dim shelters. They listened to the wailing of air raid sirens, not knowing if morning would come. Parents whispered comfort to children beneath trembling candlelight, as above them the world shook with fire. Tonight, you'll discover 25 astonishing truths about that war. Secrets stranger than myths, experiments more surreal than dreams, and human stories that reveal how fragile and how resilient life can be. From secret spy gadgets hidden inside everyday objects, to forgotten battles fought in places you'd never expect, to experiments that blurred the line between brilliance and madness. Close your eyes and allow yourself to drift backward in time. Not to the world of textbooks or headlines, but to a living, breathing past, where history itself felt larger than imagination. A world where every whisper, every invention, every choice could tilt the balance of the future. Now, let us step quietly into that world together. Would you like me to expand it a bit more toward the meditative side, adding softer sensory language, the dim glow of lamps, the hush of midnight air, so that the ending already starts easing the listener into relaxation, or keep it sharp and cinematic before the next atmospheric immersion part? Close your eyes for a moment and let the present fade away. Imagine the year is not 2025, not even 2000, but 1941. The world is trembling, not from the pulse of smartphones or city traffic, but from the distant thunder of trains carrying soldiers to unknown destinations. Listen closely. Can you hear it? The slow, mournful horn of a locomotive drifting through the night, echoing across empty fields. The metallic rhythm of wheels striking rails, like a heartbeat of an anxious century. Above the ground, boots march in unison, thousands of steps pressed into cobblestone streets. The sound is both steady and unsettling, like an endless drum that refuses to stop. Nearby, a typewriter clatters in a dimly lit office, each key striking with urgency, each sheet of paper filling with coded words that could decide the fate of entire nations. The world of 1941 hums, rumbles, clicks, and beats in ways we no longer hear in our quiet nights. Breathe in. The air is heavy, different. It carries the sharp scent of smoke drifting from coal stoves and brick ovens. In shelters beneath the cities, the air is damp, thick with the smell of stone walls that have absorbed generations of fear. And yet, mingled in that heaviness, there is the familiar, earthy aroma of black bread, baked hastily, treasured as if it were gold. The simplest things, bread, water, a piece of fruit, were not background details then. They were lifelines. Now, feel the space around you. Imagine sitting in a shelter carved from concrete, the walls rough, damp, and unwelcoming. Your back presses against the cold surface, and the chill seeps slowly into your bones. But then, a blanket, coarse and scratchy, yet warm against your hands. Or perhaps the weight of a child's small body pressed close, their head resting on your shoulder, their breath a fragile rhythm that reminds you what must be protected at all costs. In that contrast, the harshness of stone and the softness of human closeness, entire worlds of emotion unfold. Light, too, takes on a different meaning. No glowing neon, no street lamps stretching endlessly across suburbs. Instead, the flicker of a candle trembling in the corner of the room. Shadows stretch and shiver across the walls like nervous ghosts. Outside, the night sky is darker than any you have known. No headlights, no shop fronts glowing late, no city haze, only blackout curtains and streets swallowed by silence. And then, from time to time, a sudden flash. The probing beams of searchlights sweeping across the clouds, searching the heavens for danger. It is light, not of comfort, but of vigilance. Now let your imagination carry you deeper. You lie not in your familiar bed, but on straw, perhaps, in the corner of a farmhouse. The mattress is lumpy, the blanket patched, and the night air creeps in through cracks in the wooden boards. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks at shadows. Beyond the walls, a bell tolls slowly, its sound carried on the wind through the sleeping village. It is not the chime of a clock marking the time, but a signal, a call, a warning, a reminder that the world outside is not safe. Notice how time slows here. The night feels endless. Minutes stretch into hours, and hours feel like days. For the people of 1941, there was no certainty of tomorrow. Each sound, each light, each whisper in the dark might mean change, danger, or survival. Yet within that uncertainty, there is also stillness, a strange calm, born not from peace, but from the need to endure. So, as you listen, let yourself sink into that stillness. Hear the echoes of the past, the clatter of boots, the hiss of smoke, the whisper of blankets rustling in the dark. Smell the bread, the damp stone, the smoke of distant fires. Feel the chill of walls and the fragile warmth of human presence. See the candlelight, the shifting shadows, the vast night sky cleared of all but the pale glow of searchlights. You are not in the 21st century anymore. You are in a world where history itself breathes, where the silence of night is deeper, heavier, more sacred. You are in 1941, and the story is only beginning. He is 19, the winter he learns that silence can be louder than thunder. In the little attic room, where the roof slopes like a bowed head, Adam sits beside a radio the size of a small suitcase. The set hums with a patient, animal warmth. Coils gleam dull copper in the lamplight. The window is blacked out, a blanket pinned so carefully that not a ribbon of light escapes into the street. Outside, the city is quiet, the way a held breath is quiet. Adam breathes in, slow, steady. He listens the way a violin maker listens to wood. The air carries a soft, constant hiss, like a tide rolling over pebbles a continent away. Beyond the hiss are faint bird-like cries, stations calling, drifting, fading. He touches the telegraph key with 2 fingers. He doesn't press. He just rests there, feeling the cool metal, the way a pianist might hover above the opening chord. In his chest, the old question rises again, the question that tugs like a thread. Is it possible to stay human when the world around you is being unstitched? He is a radio operator. Some nights, he sends weather. Other nights, numbers that look like nonsense until the right mind and the right cipher wheel line them up into meaning. Some nights, he sends nothing at all, only waits, counting heartbeats while the seconds melt. His teachers taught him 3 rules for survival. Change your location, change your time, keep your messages short. Do not grow attached to any room, any routine, any view. But Adam is 19, and attachment is quick and quiet. He has grown attached to this sloped ceiling, to the shy creak of the floorboard near the stove, to the way the winter wind slips under the blanket and makes the lamp flame nod, as if the room is agreeing with him in small, tender gestures. In the day, he is a shadow among ordinary tasks. He lines up for bread. He carries a small bag of coal up 2 flights of stairs for an older neighbor whose hands tremble. He says little. When he speaks, his voice is soft, as if the city might overhear and change its mind about keeping him. He watches people the way he listens to static, patiently, respectfully, aware that everyone is carrying a frequency you can only hear if you're quiet long enough. The seamstress on the corner, who pretends to measure fabric while passing notes in the folds. The tram driver, whose cap is always pulled a little too low. The boy who sells matches with the solemnity of a priest. He wasn't always a whisper. As a child, he loved loud things. Thunderstorms and train stations, carnival music and market days. His father once showed him how to wind a crystal radio. The two of them bent over a kitchen table littered with wire shavings that shone like tiny fish. When a voice swam out of the tin earphone, Adam laughed, startled and delighted. How could a human being become a ripple in the air and then become a human again in someone else's kitchen? Now he knows. Now he is that ripple, crossing rooftops, slipping through curtains, tapping lightly at the edges of choices. Tonight, there is a message to send. He reads the tiny strip of paper 3 times, though he could recite it with his eyes closed. A string of numbers that could be a grocery list if you didn't know the rhythm. The page smells faintly of soap and old paper. The cipher is tucked, as always, in the spine of a cookbook, whose cover shows a loaf of bread, golden as a small sun. He sets the book beside the lamp, a domestic talisman. He closes his eyes, in and out. He has learned to make his breaths like a metronome. It keeps the mind from wandering toward fear. The first tap is always the hardest. It is the first step onto a bridge that you cannot see. His finger comes down. Dit-da, dit-dit, da-da-da. The code spills, patient as rain on a roof. He keeps it slow, gentle, the way someone tells a bedtime story to a child who is almost asleep. Between words, he pauses, counting 1, 2, 3, just as he was taught. Never greedy, never hurried, never daring to believe the room is entirely his. Somewhere, someone is listening. Somewhere, someone else may be listening for him. Minutes stretch thinner. The city beyond the window is so quiet, he can hear a cat walking along the gutter, its paws making almost no sound. He can hear the single cough of a neighbor, the soft clack of a door closing 2 floors below, the tiny sigh the lamp makes when a draft brushes its flame. Once, he would have found all this silence unnerving. Now, it is a quilt he crawls under. Now, it is a kind of mercy. He thinks of Alina, who lives 2 streets over and knows how to fix a radio with a hairpin. She has the steady hands of a clockmaker and the warm eyes of someone who has tended winter fires all her life. She is brave in the small ways that matter most. She will look directly at a soldier's face and see the boy hiding beneath the brim of the cap. If he must ask himself whether one can remain human, he has only to think of her. Yes, says the thought, like a light blooming behind the eyelids. Yes, because she is. He finishes the first block of numbers. He takes his hand off the key, rests it on the table. The wood is cool and slightly rough, like a river stone left in the shade. He sits quiet for a count of 20. His instructor's voice lives in the counting. Do not linger. Do not fall in love with the sound of yourself. The air is a mirror, and mirrors draw attention. He smiles at the memory, a private, lopsided smile. He goes on. Sometimes, when he sends, he imagines the message as a thin silver wire crossing miles and miles, spooling itself around the wrists of those who need it most, reminding them gently, "You are not alone. We are still here. Keep going." He knows the messages can also lead to destruction. He has seen roofs broken open like eggs. He has seen streets littered with plaster dust that looks like snowfall. The paradox sits with him like a quiet, complicated friend. The very same skill that can save can also guide harm. How does one keep tender hands when they are asked to hold such heavy truths? He does not know. But he suspects the answer lies not in withdrawal, but in attention. He remembers a night in autumn when the sirens went first, long and mournful, like a choir set aflame, and then the sky flickered. The street filled with people moving without speaking, holding blankets and kettles and cats. In the shelter, a baby cried until an old woman hummed a lullaby, so softly that those nearest fell silent to hear. And soon the crying became a hitching breath, and then the baby slept. Adam watched the old woman's mouth form the notes, her hand stroking the baby's forehead with infinite patience. That, he thought, that is how we remain human. Not in the grand gestures. Those were for another century. But in the small, repetitive acts that knit frayed edges back together. Humming, sharing bread, keeping watch. Another block of numbers goes out. He adjusts the tuning slightly, the way a sailor might adjust a sail to a shifting wind. In and out. The message is nearly complete. Somewhere a clock strikes. He counts, but the sound seems to dissolve before it finishes, as if time itself were shy tonight. When the last character leaves his fingertip and becomes air, he does not move. He lets the room settle around him, like quiet snow. Then, with the care of a person backing away from a sleeping animal, he turns the set to a low murmur, almost inaudible, and leans back in the chair. His spine cracks softly, a small, human sound. He presses his palms together and rubs them, waking warmth. He is always cold after sending, perhaps because fear pulls heat out of the body the way the moon pulls the tide from the shore. He cleans the table. He folds the blanket, straightens the cookbook, slides the cipher back into its safe seam with a practiced, tender pressure. The lamp flame dips when he stands. He cups it with a hand until it steadies, as if he is apologizing to it for disruption. Before he sleeps, he listens once more to the room. The soft electricity, the small, reliable groan of old wood, the breath that is finally deepening in his own chest. He lays down on the narrow bed and stares at the underside of the roof. There is a knot in the wood that looks like an eye. He has named it, privately. He tells it good night. Morning is gray, as if the world has been wrapped in ash-colored cloth. He wakes to the smell of someone's toast and the distant clink of a milk bottle. He washes his face in cold water and watches the reflection in the bowl tremble. His face is the face of a boy being taught by the world to be old and then taught by kindness to be young again. He dries his hands on a towel that has been mended 3 times. He leaves the attic and becomes an ordinary boy on an ordinary staircase. On the landing, he meets the neighbor whose hands shake. They trade a smile. "The weather will turn," she says, as if weather were a person who might be persuaded by politeness. Adam nods. He carries her coal. The coal dust leaves fingerprints on everything. Even his thoughts feel smudged, somehow more real. He goes to stand in the bread line. People are wrapped in coats the color of moths. A child scuffs a shoe against the curb and watches the cloud of dust like a magician watches his own trick. When Adam reaches the front, the baker gives him the loaf that is not quite the shape it should be. It is warm through the paper. He cradles it as one cradles a sleeping bird. For a moment, carrying warm bread down a cold street, he is nothing but human. No codes, no shadows, no mirrors. He is the same boy who once laughed at a voice arriving through an earphone like a ship through fog. He visits Alina under the pretext of fixing a loose wire. She lifts the lid of the radio as if it were a treasure chest. "You are careful?" she asks, not looking up, pretending to be aggravated by a stubborn screw. "Careful is my middle name," he says, which is not true. His middle name is something common and good, but she accepts it. Their talk is the talk of people carrying unspoken weights, light in words, heavy in pauses. She gives him a small tin of tea leaves wrapped in wax paper. He says he cannot accept it. She says he can. They pass it back and forth twice, like a game, before he tucks it into his coat as if it were the most fragile thing in the world. Perhaps it is. That evening, the city is soft with fog. The street lamps are blindfolded. The sky looks like wool. He climbs the stairs with a step that knows each creak by name. In the attic, he makes a cup of tea so small it is almost only an idea of tea, but the steam touches his face like a blessing. He thinks of the old woman humming. He thinks of the babies breathing. He thinks of the messages traveling through the air, thin silver wires connecting strangers who will never see one another's faces, who are kept alive by the idea of the other. Night deepens. He sets the lamp low. He listens to the radio's breathing. He knows there will be another message soon. There always is. A knock that is not a knock. A signal that he has learned to hear in the pattern of silence, the way a shepherd learns the difference between wind and wolf. When it comes, he will answer. He will make his fingers into a voice again. He will carry the paradox in his pocket like a smooth stone. You can be gentle and still be brave. You can be precise and still be kind. You can hold the line without hardening your heart. In the quiet between tasks, he writes small things on scraps of paper. Phrases, really, like charms. Keep the lamp steady. Listen before you speak. Do not forget the names of things. He keeps these in a tin, along with buttons, a stub of pencil, a photograph of his family taken before the world unfolded into two halves. In the photograph, they are not brave or tragic or extraordinary. They are merely themselves. His mother's hand rests on his shoulder, the way his own hand rests on the lamp. Protectively, lightly. Another night. Another attic. Because he takes the rule of movement seriously. This room smells of apples stored for winter, sweet and faint and clean. The window faces the river. The water moves, even when everything else holds still. This comforts him. He thinks of all the messages that must be traveling just above its surface, skipping like stones, going where they are needed. He taps the key with the small, respectful confidence of someone who has tuned himself to something larger and quieter than fear. There is a moment of danger. There always is. And tonight it arrives in the shape of an extra silence where a response should be. He pauses. He counts. He knows the longer he stays, the brighter his little star becomes on someone's invisible map. He adjusts the coil a fraction, like a man adjusting the brim of his hat. The room seems to lean in, listening with him. Then far away, a voice returns, a soft river of sound across the band, and the tension unwinds, the way a tightened thread unwinds. when you set it down gently. He finishes. He breathes. He becomes ordinary again. If you asked him, years later, what it felt like to remain gentle in a season that taught hardness, he might say this: "It felt like lighting a candle with cupped hands while the wind tried to blow it out. It felt like carrying a sleeping child down a shaking staircase. It felt like sending a lullaby through wires." He will not speak of victories. Those belong to the maps. He will speak of the night he gave half his bread to a stranger in the stairwell because the stranger's hands were shaking too hard to hold anything. He will speak of Alina's tea and the old woman's humming, and the way the cat on the roof learned to trust his step. The question returns as the key cools under his fingers. Can a person remain human when the world around them is unstitched? He does not answer with words. He answers by setting the lamp to a steadier glow, by placing the cookbook gently back on the shelf, by writing one more small charm and slipping it into the tin. When in doubt, choose the act that leaves the room warmer. Outside, beyond blackout curtains and careful windows, the night is immense and tender. Searchlights comb the sky not far away, their pale arms sweeping, searching. The river keeps its slow, secret music. Somewhere a bell tolls, once, twice, then rests. Adam leans his head against the cool slope of the wall and closes his eyes. The radio breathes. He breathes with it. In that simple, synchronized rhythm, humanity persists, not as a grand statement, but as a soft, continuous thread, passing from hand to hand in the dark. By the time winter loosens its fist, Adam's life has braided itself with other lives, threads crossing in quiet places where the world still remembers how to be gentle. His work is made of invisibilities, call signs, hours that don't exist on clocks, maps that live only in a mind. But the meaning of that work arrives to him in ordinary scenes, in faces he meets when he steps out of the attic and becomes simply another person in a city that is learning to breathe through storms. On the street, people queue for bread that arrives warm enough to fog the paper. The line is its own small universe. Boots scrape, scarves are tugged tighter, conversations begin, pause, and drift on like feathers. There is an etiquette to waiting, the nod of patience, the blessing of a shared joke, the open secret that everyone is counting, coupons, steps, the days since the last letter. Posters look down from brick walls, marching letters, brave faces, a palette of red and black and gold that tries to hold the eye. The images are confident, almost musical. Dig for victory. Careless talk costs lives. We're all in it. People look at them, absorb a little of their rhythm, and then return to the quiet work of staying human, mending a glove, passing a crust to a child, keeping a place in the line for a neighbor too tired to stand. Adam stands there with the others, his breath white in the air. He is holding two envelopes in his pocket. One is official and blank as a closed door. The other is not supposed to exist. A square of paper that smells faintly of tea leaves, folded around a sentence he keeps for later, an ordinary sentence, a human one. I saw early snow on the river today. It made the water look soft. He delivers coal to the building next door, and that is how he meets Marta, the nurse. She is younger than the word suggests. The word nurse sounds to Adam like starched decades and polished shoes. Marta moves like a person trained to listen with her hands. In the kitchen, where she rents a room, the kettle is always on its way to boiling. Her sleeves are rolled. The shadows under her eyes look like thumbprints. When she laughs, it is as if a window has been opened, and for a moment, the air changes. By day, Marta works in a ward that grew like a sudden wing from an old hospital. Beds where there used to be filing cabinets, sheets pinned where there used to be glass. The ward smells of soap and iron and something sweet that never quite reveals its name. She is not one of the loud heroes on the posters. Her work is a repetition of small, exact kindnesses. Thermometers shook down with a flick of the wrist. A cup lifted to a mouth, too tired to lift itself. A note written in a careful hand to a mother who cannot visit. She looks at Adam's hands when he brings coal, and she knows more than she says. The way he places the scuttle by the stove, the way he listens before he speaks. She doesn't ask questions that turn into locks. She offers him a chair and a cup of very weak tea. In the steam, their faces soften into the same vow, to warm what can be warmed. On certain evenings, Marta brings stories home the way a seamstress brings home fabric scraps. Pieces too small to be the whole, but perfect for patching. A patient who sleeps with a hand closed around a photograph, as if the picture itself breathes. Another who asks every morning, first thing, "What day is it?" and seems relieved, whatever the answer is, to discover that a day has, in fact, arrived. A violinist who, between fevers, drew a bow across an imaginary instrument and played so quietly that even the curtains listened. You can play music without sound, Marta says, resting her forehead on the cool glass of the window. I didn't know that before. Adam nods. He knows. He sends lullabies through wire. The city becomes a language. You can read it if you go slowly. A bicycle leaned just so against a lamppost is a message to someone who understands the angle. A flower pot, moved from one sill to another. A pause in a radio broadcast, precisely at the hour when the news usually runs on. The radio, omnipresent, is both town crier and bedtime storyteller. Voices, formal and human, travel the air and alight in kitchens. Morning bulletins clipped like hedges. Evening programs that remember how to be kind. Readings of poems. Recipes that make scarcity sound like art. Dramas that end not in triumph, but in a sigh, as if they know to walk softly past the listener's pillow. Sometimes, when the sirens fall silent and the city gathers itself like a child calming after tears, people descend into the underground, not only to shelter, but to live a few hours in the company of others. When the platforms fill, communities appear as quickly and naturally as sleep. A woman opens a tin of biscuits and shares. Someone spreads a blanket. Someone else produces a harmonica blown soft as breath. On certain nights, stories will later say, it happened often, but no one counted. There are impromptu concerts. A student with a violin that has known better halls. A baritone who once sang in a choir stands at the lip of the platform and offers a lullaby to strangers who, by the second verse, are no longer strangers. Children sit cross-legged, eyes bright, one hand tucked into a parent's sleeve. Music rings against the tunnel walls and returns, warmer, as if the city itself were humming along. It is in the underground that Adam first sees Anya, the refugee child. She has a coat with a large button missing and a suitcase that is almost as big as she is. The suitcase is tied with string in a knot that someone made fast and good, the sort of knot that says, "This must not open by accident." Her hair is braided in the earnest, slightly lopsided way that happens when a braid is made in a hurry with careful hands. She has a paper label pinned to her collar with a number and a name written in ink that has bled a little. When she smiles, it is sudden and bold, like a match lit in a dark room. Anya does not speak much at first. Children who have traveled far, learn the economy of words. But she draws. A pencil stub and a brown paper bag become a city of animals with umbrellas, a train made of cakes, a house whose roof lifts like the lid of a music box. She leans against Marta on a wooden bench in the station, and both of them, in different ways, rest. I had a cat, Anya says to no one in particular. He was very proud. The sentence hangs for a moment, and then the air around it builds a home. Marta nods, solemn. Proud cats are very brave, she says. They guard the warmest patches of sunshine. Adam offers Anya the corner of his bread, and she accepts it in the exact center of her palm. He shows her how the radio glows like a small moon when the valves are warm, how the lamp flame breathes when the room shifts. In return, Anya shows him a trick, how to fold a paper bird that stays airborne 1 second longer than it should. They set it sailing in the stairwell. For that second, the world parts and lets a miracle through. News from other fronts arrives like weather, sometimes in gusts that rattle the windows, sometimes in a slow, patient drizzle that runs into every conversation, even the ones that begin with soup and end with knitting. There was a letter from the east. They say the winter was like a wall. They say a convoy made it through the snow with only its shadow for company. No one speaks loudly of these things, as if loudness might break them. Still, the maps in people's minds adjust, tilt, hold. One night in late spring, on a street that remembers markets and laughter, Adam meets Thomas, a soldier on leave from another front. His coat has the tired shine of fabric that has been rained on and dried by wind. His boots carry a geography of mud. He is older than Adam by a small lifetime. They meet because of a bicycle chain that slips its tooth and refuses to bite again, and because of a habit Adam has of stopping when he hears the small, distressed sounds machines make. He kneels, wipes his fingers, and coaxes the chain back into place. It is a minor miracle, completed without ceremony. Thomas thanks him with a handshake that says, "I know what it is to make something work again." They walk to the corner together. Thomas speaks softly, as if the city were a sleeping child. He tells Adam that on his front, the world is measured in distances a person can walk in a day, and that the patience of feet is underestimated. There is a rhythm to going forward, he says, and a rhythm to waiting. We have learned both. He does not tell stories of battle. He speaks of breakfasts, eaten in the smell of wet wool, of a boy who carried a book through a month of rain because the pages, when dry, smelled like home, of men who one evening, when the sky looked like tin, made a stage out of crates and played a comedy so gently that their laughter did not wake the crows. When they part, Thomas puts a small pencil into Adam's hand, a pencil shaved down until it is barely longer than a thumb. "For your maps," he says. He means another kind of maps, the ones people carry inside. Society, in these months, feels like a great instrument played by thousands of quiet hands. The market stalls open less often, but when they do, someone sings under her breath as she weighs potatoes. A tram conductor keeps a tally of smiles and enters them in a notebook not meant for such records. The librarian keeps a shelf of books that are not about war and points to them with a look that says, "Here is where your mind can rest." At the cinema, when the projector stutters and the film halts on a single frame, the audience waits without complaint, as if this too were a kind of plot twist. And when the story resumes, there is a soft applause that feels like gratitude not to the movie, but to one another. Propaganda posters multiply like seasonal flowers, changing colors with the months. Some are fierce, some are almost tender. Adam studies them the way a radio man studies static, listening for the frequency beneath the words. He understands their purpose, their geometry. He also understands the counterweight, the quiet, unpostered acts that keep the city balanced. A boy chalks a hopscotch grid on a pavement square despite the rain that will come. A mother teaches a child to tie a shoelace with the sort of attention some people give to prayer. An old man sands a rough spot on a bench so that a stranger he will never meet will sit without catching a thread. On evenings, when the news is good, people permit themselves the bravery of washing windows and opening them an extra inch. On evenings, when the news is not good, the underground gathers them again, and the low ceiling holds their shared breath. There are nights when someone reads aloud from a book into the hush, and the sentences, though written years before, seem to be speaking gently to the moment. There are nights when a woman with ink-stained fingers sets a stack of handbills on a crate. Concert tonight. 8 o'clock. Platform 4. The performers are whoever can play. The audience is whoever needs to remember that the human body contains music. Marta and Anya attend these concerts when the ward sleeps and the trains have slipped past like whales. Adam stands at the back, the way a sentry stands, present, but trying not to take up too much space in the story. Someone plays a violin, whose varnish has been cracked and polished, until it shines like the memory of sunlight. Someone else sings a folk song from a place with high hills and small houses, and you can hear those hills in the rise of the melody. At the end, there is no ovation in the usual sense. There is a long exhale, a murmur, the sound of blankets rearranged, of shoulders settling. People sleep lighter, which is to say, braver. Rations shape the day into a careful choreography. Sugar becomes a holiday. Butter, when it appears, is greeted like a distant cousin who has traveled far. The ingenuity of kitchens becomes legend. Marta shows Adam how to make a cake out of breadcrumbs and apples that taste like memory. In return, Adam shows her how to coax a radio into clarity when the signal sulks, how to wait for the music hidden inside the noise. Anya draws menus for imaginary restaurants. Today we serve sunshine soup, cloud sandwiches, laughter pie, and posts them on the wall with tape that no longer sticks but still hopes. Radio broadcasts thread through all of it, a net with holes large enough for kindness to pass through. You can tell the hour by the voice. There is the brisk morning presenter, whose consonants ring like glasses in a neat row. There is the evening voice that has learned how to say difficult things in a way that does not bruise. Between bulletins come programs that could be dismissed as trivial if one forgets that survival is made of trivialities. Gardening advice for bombed-out yards, instructions for darning in ways that turn mend into pattern. The laughter of comedians who know exactly how long to pause before the line so that even the tired will smile. Adam sometimes thinks the city is a single organism, learning how to sleep with one eye open. It dreams. In the underground, in queues, in the narrow spaces between chores. It wakes quickly when it must, and then, like a good guardian, it settles again so the children can rest. He learns to move in that rhythm, work in the sharp hours, in the soft ones, be present where presence is needed more than skill. Carry a bucket, listen, lean a ladder, tell a story that remembers the taste of peaches. The war, of course, is larger than any neighborhood. Letters speak of far forests and cold oceans. Thomas sends a postcard with a drawing of a bridge. On the back, in a careful hand, he writes only, "Still walking." It is enough. Some evenings, a map is unrolled on Marta's table, and people trace routes not with fingers, but with eyes, as if touching would disturb the delicate geometry of hope. They do not talk of victory. They talk of persistence, which is a quieter word and truer to the shape of their days. There is an afternoon when Anya loses her paper label. For a little while, panic runs light-footed through the room. The label has become part of who she is here, a small passport pinned to the world. Adam finds it under the table, where it has hidden like a shy creature. He smooths it with a fingertip. The ink is smudged, but the name is still itself. He pins it back, careful not to prick skin. "There," he says. "Still you." Anya nods, solemn. "Still me." She looks up at the poster on the wall. "Keep calm and carry on," and whispers it like a spell that works only if spoken softly. When spring lengthens into the possibility of summer, the city loosens another button. Windows open an inch, and then two. In the evenings, chairs appear on stoops. Someone brings out a gramophone whose crank turns like a prayer wheel. The record is scratched, but the song under the scratches is patient. Marta closes her eyes and leans her head back against the doorframe. Adam watches Anya teach a new child the art of launching paper birds. Thomas, when he comes through once more, stands at the edge of the light, as if unsure whether it is meant for him. It is. He steps in. For a while, these lives, gathered by chance and kept by choice, make a small republic of quiet things. Tea that tastes like leaves and thyme. Bread that forgives a too-hot oven. Laughter that knows where to land without waking the baby next door. Through it all, the paradox that lives in Adam's pocket, be gentle while doing necessary hard things, finds echoes everywhere, in Marta's steady hands, lifting a cup to a wounded mouth, in the underground's concerts, soft as moth wings, in Anya's drawings, which make a world safe enough for cats to be proud, in Thomas's pencil, worn short by notes that some future self will read and recognize as proof that he did not become less human to survive. Society is not a single story told loudly. It is 100,000 stories told quietly, at kitchen tables and on platforms, and in lines that move one step and then wait, one step and then wait. It is the grammar of kindness practiced until it is fluent. It is the discipline of not looking away. It is, in those rare, brave minutes, when the searchlights rest and the sky returns to being only sky, a city remembering how to watch the moon. On a night when the air smells of rain and warm dust, Adam walks home past a wall where the posters have begun to fray at the edges. The slogans flap a little, less sure of their lines. He understands. Words are strong, but they are not the only strong thing. He looks up. In a window, someone is reading by lamplight to a circle of faces. On a step, a woman is untying her apron, and the knot comes loose as if it were glad to rest. In his pocket, a folded paper bird waits to be set free. He will save it for the stairwell, where the air is still enough to cradle its flight. What is a society in wartime? It is this: a collection of rooms where people keep one another warm, a web of stations where music is played to soothe a city's nerves, a sequence of meals made from almost nothings and served with ceremony, a bulletin read aloud in a voice that remembers you might be falling asleep while you listen. It is also the set of eyes that meet in passing and say, without words, "I see you." keep going. In that shared gaze, Adam finds the answer that keeps his hand steady when he returns to the key. Humanity is not an idea to be defended. It is a practice to be repeated, patiently, the way a nurse wraps a bandage, the way a child folds a bird, the way a soldier, tired and gentle, writes, still walking and means, still human. And so the city continues, breathing in cues and lullabies, in posters and paragraphs, in small concerts played under streets built for trains, beneath the hum of the radio, beneath the measured march of announcements and alarms, a softer rhythm is learning to lead. The rhythm of people choosing again and again the act that leaves the room warmer. Within that rhythm, Adam returns each night to his attic, to the lamp that nods when the wind passes, to the radio that glows like a quiet moon. The messages he sends now carry not only numbers and coordinates, but the echo of the world outside his door. Tea steamed into a cold room, a violin in a tunnel, the sound of children inventing new rules for old games. Tomorrow will have its own weather, its own shortages and small abundances, its own bulletins and crossings out, its own moments when the city remembers to hum. Whatever comes, the braid holds, the nurse with ink on her fingers and steadiness in her bones, the refugee child whose drawings make a home where one is needed, the soldier who measures distance by footsteps and kindness by the weight it lifts. In their company, Adam's work becomes not just a duty, but a way of keeping time with a community that refuses, even now, to harden. And in that refusal lies the quiet strength of a society that even while the world is unstitched, is busy sewing. The world beyond the attic is an ocean of events. Adam learns to read it not as a storm, but as tides, long repeating motions, each leaving a trace of salt upon ordinary lives. Here are 25 quiet waves, unlikely truths that crossed kitchens and barracks and stations, touching softly the edges of a single room with a lamp and a radio. Wave 1. Ice that wanted to be a ship. There was a plan to build aircraft carriers from reinforced ice, pulp and cold married into floating fortresses. Engineers tested blocks that healed when scored with a knife. Adam hears the whisper of it in a late bulletin and smiles at the strangeness. In a world on fire, even ice was asked to be brave. Wave 2. Dogs that learned the sky. On distant fields, dogs were trained for parachutes and peril, their courage harnessed to human designs. Adam thinks of the small, practical loyalties that carry us through, how creatures, too, were enlisted in the grammar of survival. He scratches the roof cat between its ears and says nothing to the air. Wave 3. A factory that pretended to be a neighborhood. In one American valley, aircraft plants hid under painted streets and cloth lawns, a make-believe suburb stretched across rooftops. From above, the war industry looked like Sunday. Marta loves this story. It is camouflage in the service of life, a way of saying, let work continue, let workers go home. Wave 4. Fires lit on empty hills. Out on the English coast, decoy starfish sites burned bright to lure danger away from cities. Men tended false towns with real flames. Thomas understands. Sometimes the bravest road is misdirection. A lantern waved where no one sleeps, so that someone else may sleep. Wave 5. The artists who shaped shadows. An American ghost army inflated rubber tanks, painted phantoms, and played recorded engines through giant speakers. Deception became stagecraft. Canvas and sound effects guarded flesh and blood. Adam, who sends invisible words, feels kinship. Protection can be a performance of absence. Wave 6. Pigeons with medals. Small wings carried messages through wind and shot. Some saved hundreds with a flight that lasted minutes. One bird, they say, reached a village just in time. Anya listens, eyes wide, then draws a pigeon with a laurel crown. For speed, she explains. For faith, Adam thinks. Wave 7. Silk that folded into maps. Agents tucked maps into scarves, compasses into buttons, portraits into matchboxes. A wardrobe of quiet cleverness. Marta runs a finger along a seam of her coat, as if a secret might be hidden there. She decides she likes the idea that help can be soft to the touch. Wave 8. A code that was a people. Across the ocean, Navajo code talkers spoke a language the war could not break. Their words turned into armor for convoys and islands. Adam imagines a voice, calm and exact, holding a beach in its syllables. He lowers his own voice in respect. Wave 9. Computers that glowed in secret. In a guarded room, warming valves and paper tapes learn to read enemy ciphers. The machine's name will be kept quiet for years, but its logic will outlast the blackout curtains. Anya asks if machines can dream. Only about patterns, Adam says, and even then, they need us to show them how. Wave 10. Weather that chose a day. A narrow window in the clouds opened over a cold sea. Someone brave said, "Go now." The tide of history waited for a wind shift. Marta, who has guided breaths and fevers, nods. The body trusts small changes. So, too, does a fleet. Wave 11. Letters that turned into film. To lighten ships, whole sacks of love were photographed onto tiny reels. V-mail, curled and neat. At journey's end, they grew back into envelopes like dry flowers touching water. Thomas carried one in his pocket until the crease learned his walk. Wave 12. Gardens that fed a nation. Backyards became fields. City parks pulled carrots from soil the way stories pull comfort from air. Victory gardens fed not just mouths, but morale. Anya plants imaginary seeds in a windowsill box and announces a harvest of sunshine peas. Wave 13. Ships that hurried. Welders and riveters learned to teach steel to move quickly. A Liberty ship slid into water mere days after its keel kissed the blocks. Adam thinks of the hands behind a headline, the 1,000 tiny decisions that make impossible change its mind. Wave 14. Medicine brewed like a miracle. Penicillin scaled from Petri dishes to deep tanks. Corn liquor and ingenuity turned mold into rescue so that wounds once feared might heal. Marta's shoulders drop when she tells it. Some battles are won in laboratories with clean benches and patient hours. Wave 15. A body carrying lies to save lives. Somewhere on a dark coast, a briefcase at a drowned wrist sent armies the wrong way. It is a sorrowful tale, told quietly, a reminder that even victories can have grief sewn into their hymns. Adam leaves a small pause after he speaks it, like a bow. Wave 16. Balloons that crossed an ocean. High, almost soundless, paper lanterns rode the jet stream across the Pacific. Most fell into empty forest and snow. A few did not. The news traveled in whispers, so that silence might keep others safe. Tomas ties his mind to the word vigilance and keeps walking. Wave 17. Nights flown by witches. Young women piloted biplanes made of wood and canvas, cutting the engines to glide quiet over targets. The enemies named them for the sound of the wind on their wings. Night witches. Marta grins. Even fear found poetry for them. Wave 18. A debate over beer. At home, grain was counted like precious beads. Should barley become bread or morale? The answer was careful. Ration the mugs. Send cans to distant islands on special days. In hot places, 2 beers under a palm could become an afternoon of laughter that felt like a furlough. Wave 19. A city listening for the sky. Radar arrays stood like patient fences along coasts, watched over by women and men who translated flicker into warning. Adam touches the radio's warm side, grateful to every guardian who learned to read light where no light should be. Wave 20. Posters that whispered "we." The fonts were bold, the colors marched, but beneath the slogans lived a gentler revolution. The daily decision to do without so another could have. Anya copies a poster and adds a cat in the corner. Everyone helps, she says. Precisely. Wave 21. Blackout and stars. With lights lowered, the night reclaimed cities. Astronomers glimpsed skies their grandparents had known. People looked up and found constellations waiting like old friends. Adam, coming home, lifts his eyes and names one. A private ritual, stitched lightly into a public rule. Wave 22. Art where people slept. In underground stations, an artist sketched dreamers tucked in rows. The drawings made shelters into chapels of rest. Marta, who walks the platforms as if moving through a ward, recognizes the holiness of blankets neatly spread. Wave 23. Food that traveled by story. Canned meat crossed oceans, filled mess kits, and later found new names in new kitchens. War changes palates as well as borders. Thomas remembers a stew improvised in a tin hat. He still swears he can taste the campfire in it. Wave 24. Maskirovka. Houses that moved. On step and street, deception dressed steel as wood. Tanks hid beneath skins of barns, haystacks, even little chapels painted on canvas. From the air, danger looked domestic. Adam thinks of the attic's blanket over the window. How safety sometimes wears the costume of ordinary life. Wave 25. The secret work of women in wires. Typists who were mathematicians, riveters who were poets, switchboard operators who learned to stitch continents together. Millions of women carried the war on their shoulders and then put those shoulders to the task of peace. Marta ties her apron with a firm, beautiful knot. Ready, she says. Each wave seems small when told alone. A garden patch, a feathered messenger, a fabric map folded into a pocket. Yet Adam understands, because his life is a life of small things, that oceans are made of drops. A message short enough to fit in a breath can avert a disaster big enough to fill a city with smoke. A concert played under the earth can lift a heart above it. A pencil given by a soldier can redraw a day. When he returns to the key, he carries these truths into the rhythm of dots and dashes. He thinks of ice and pigeons, of gardens and ghosts, of the weather's narrow doorway, and the open patience of hands at benches and bedsides. He is, in his own modest way, another wave, a quiet force that moves, then returns, leaving behind, if he is lucky, just enough warmth that someone he will never meet can rest. And so the braid tightens, private lives and public currents, a lamp in an attic, and stars over oceans. The lesson is not carved into stone. It is felt in the fingertips. Even the smallest acts lean on the fulcrum of history. Even the softest choices tilt the scale. In a world learning how to sew itself again, thread by thread, the tiniest stitch still holds. At first, the strangeness arrives like curiosities told over weak tea, ideas so odd they seem harmless. On a wind-polished beach, engineers unleash the great Ponjandrum, a towering cart of rockets meant to roll through defenses. It jitters, wobbles, sheds fire like a sparkler, and veers into the sea while dignitaries duck behind sandbags, laughing with the nervousness reserved for near mishaps. In workshops, Bats are fitted with tiny harnesses. Project X-ray, a belief that nature might carry embers where airplanes could not. In trials, the creatures roost exactly as bats do, under eaves, in roofs. And the results are alarming enough to prove the concept and gentle enough, in the hands of history's choices, to be set aside. These are the early notes, peculiar, almost comic. But the melody shifts. Balloons the size of small rooms slip into high wind and cross an ocean almost without sound. Paper globes riding the jet stream. Most drift into snow and forest hush. A few don't. The news speaks softly, as if volume might invite repetition. Adam listens to the bulletin with his palms pressed together, as if in prayer. He looks at Anya's drawing of a pigeon with a laurel crown and thinks how the sky can hold both mercy and mischief at once. Deception grows grander. On far fields, rubber armor swells with air. Speakers hum engines that don't exist. Artists paint shadows where no divisions stand. The ghost army performs distance like a play. In coastal night, decoy fires bloom on empty moors to draw danger from sleeping streets. Men tend false towns with real courage. Marta approves of these illusions. Kindness, wearing the mask of spectacle. But the climb continues. Steel learns to arc beyond the reach of sirens. Rockets rise without warning and arrive before sound. The air itself becomes a messenger that does not announce itself. People measure safety not by minutes of notice, but by the randomness of fortune. Thomas, tracing a line on a postcard, writes only, "Still walking." In those two words is a lifetime of dust and patience. There is a week when Adam cannot sleep between messages. Reports pile like weather in a hallway. He drinks tea so pale it is almost only steam, and sets his breathing to the metronome of the key. Numbers travel under his fingertips like a river carrying small boats. Outside, the searchlights comb the sky with long, pale arms. Inside, he keeps the lamp low, as if brightness could make him a silhouette on an unseen map. The city adapts. Aluminum strips, window, chaff, flutter from planes and confuse radar with artificial stars. Radios stutter with jamming that sounds like rain against a roof. In underground stations, the concerts multiply. A violinist plays a sarabande with such quiet dignity that even the rails seem to lean closer. Children clap once, softly, and then remember to rest. Stranger stories arrive, as if the mind of war were trying on costumes. Exploding rats intended to sabotage boilers. False factories stretched like theatrical canvases across rooftops. Silk maps sewn into hems. Compasses hid in buttons that click like beetles when turned. Each small scheme is a thread in a large net that no one will ever see in full. And then, the more outlandish. Somewhere in reports, half rumor and half draftsmanship, appears the notion of a mirror in orbit. A great disk, angled to gather sunlight and lay a bright scar across a city far below. It is an audacity of geometry, more mythology than metal, and it never comes to pass. But to imagine it, this plan to reach into the quiet, steady heart of day and bend it into a weapon, is to feel how far minds will travel when maps seem to end. Adam reads the line twice, then closes his eyes. Not everything thinkable must be done, he tells the room, barely above a whisper. The escalation does not live only in machines. It lives in the arithmetic of absence, in queues that grow longer and cupboards that echo. In the ward, where Marta learns to speak exhaustion in ways that comfort rather than collapse. In Anya's drawings, where cats now wear helmets of flowers as if to insist on softness even in pictures of marching. In Thomas's pencil, shaved down further, notes becoming almost hieroglyphs because the page grows stingy with space. Then the breaking point weaks. Not a single day, not one trumpet, but a series of crescendos that wave through continents. Weather chooses a window. Steel finds beaches. Bridges tremble. Cities learn the bitter grammar of fire. The news is voiced with care, each syllable placed as gently as possible on morning tables. Adam listens with his forehead against the wall, the cool plaster dampening the heat of fear. He thinks of the old woman humming in the shelter, of tea leaves wrapped in wax paper, of bread warm through its thin bag. He thinks, hold to the smallest true things. They are the only handrails on this staircase. And still the strangeness. Messages photographed onto film the width of a fingernail. Letters that become light to cross oceans and become paper again at journey's end. Antibiotics scaled from petri dish to factory vat. Wounds that once meant farewell, now accepting stitches and sleep. Gardens that feed not just families, but morale. Carrots pulled from squares of city dirt as if hope itself were a root vegetable. The culmination is not one headline, but many, fanned like cards on a table. A city leveled, a fleet turned back, a flag raised, a treaty drafted, a silence after a blast too bright to name. Among the wildest proposals, mirrors that would burn, schemes that would move moons. The war chooses, finally, to end as wars always end, in agreements written by hands that tremble, in stares that cannot meet, in relief that arrives like rain after a season that forgot how to make clouds. The vast machinery winds down. The posters fade. The uniforms hang in wardrobes next to Sunday shirts. The mirror in the sky remains a drawing in a folder. The rockets become museums. The rubber tanks deflate into memory. For Adam, the climax is smaller and therefore truer. One evening, when the light is the color of unpolished brass, a final message arrives with the simplicity of a breath. A short series, a known hand, a code that says enough. He sends back the agreed reply, closes the set, and lays his fingers flat on the table as if calming a restless animal. He does not cheer. He listens. Outside, a window opens without fear. Somewhere far off, a bell rings and keeps ringing, as if surprised by its own permission to be joyful. Resolution is not immediate. It is a careful unspooling. The blackout curtains are unpinned and folded. Their creases will remember years of night. The searchlights go dark and reveal stars that look newly made. Streets relearn lamplight. Markets rediscover abundance slowly, like movement returning to a limb. The underground concerts migrate upward, into plazas, onto church steps, into courtyards where ivy climbs. The violinist plays in daylight and squints. The notes do not mind the sun. Children chalk the pavement with ferocity, yelling rules of games invented on the spot. Grown-ups pretend not to learn the rules and do. Marta's ward changes shape. Beds empty and are scrubbed with intention, as if cleaning could be a sacrament. She learns to sleep through the night again, and wakes startled, at first, by the ordinariness of morning. She keeps the habit of carrying a spare handkerchief. Old disciplines linger like beloved scars. She writes to a colleague who taught her a knot that holds a bandage without biting skin. I think of your hands every time I tie an apron, she says. Some skills belong to both war and peace. Anya's paper label is unpinned, laid flat in a book, and forgotten there on purpose. She draws a new city into which trains arrive with nothing but travelers and luggage and dog baskets. Cats return to being proud about the correct things. Sun patches, windowsills, the ability to leap silently from one chair to another. She still folds birds. They fly longer in calm air. Thomas walks home along roads that feel wider now that no one is counting them. He keeps the habit of scanning horizons. Vigilance does not vanish so much as it rests. He plants a tree where a checkpoint once stood and ties it to a stake with cloth torn from a shirt that walked 1,000 miles. He visits friends, some present and some only names spoken like prayers. He keeps the pencil nub in a tin with buttons and promises. Adam takes down the blanket from the attic window. The first night, he sleeps with starlight on the ceiling. He wakes twice, startled by brightness, then smiles at himself in the dark. He moves the radio to the other side of the table, as one might move a chair at the end of a long conversation to invite a different kind of talk. Static, which once sounded like risk, now sounds like weather in a far field. He still listens. One does not stop listening. But the listening is no longer a guard's stance. It is a gardener's. He tunes for music and finds it. A waltz fuzzed by distance. A choir that learned to be brave in tunnels, now singing under an open sky. The city, relieved of armor, discovers its skeleton is made of ordinary kindness. Posters peel. New ones appear. Lost cats. Piano lessons. Flats to let. Dances on Saturday. Window glass reflects faces that no longer flinch. Shopkeepers relearn the art of display. Piles of oranges become theater. There is laughter that remembers its inside voice and then decides to risk the outside one. When people speak of the past years, they do so the way one discusses weather that was both cruel and instructive. They show each other small trophies, a recipe that saves sugar without sacrificing delight, a mended sleeve whose stitches tell a story, a photograph where everyone looks older and somehow more themselves. Museums fill with large things, engines, shells, maps, and also with small things, a pigeon's medal, a silk square printed with a coast, a toy carved in a barracks. Visitors stand longest before the small things. They feel the room grow warmer. The largest comprehension arrives quietly. In a war of giants, it was the littlest acts that kept people human. A concert in a tunnel, a paper bird that flew 1 second longer than physics had promised, a nurse who found the exact temperature of a cup so that trembling fingers would accept it, a radio man who laid his hand flat on a table and waited 3 heartbeats between words. The grand ideas, the mirrored suns, the rocket parabolas might fill books, but it is the handrails of ordinary tenderness that brought people across the shaky bridge into the new century. One evening, Adam, Marta, Anya, and Thomas meet in a courtyard where vines are reclaiming brick. A gramophone plays a song with scratches so regular they feel like percussion. They eat bread that needs no apology. The air is sweet with something as simple as summer. Anya launches a bird. It spirals and glides and lands on Thomas's palm as if the whole exercise had always been designed to end there. They look up. The sky is merely sky. No beams searching it. No balloons riding it. No streaks of silent warning. The stars are back to being dots of patience. Adam closes his eyes and listens, not for danger, but for the ordinary music of peacetime. A neighbor laughing 2 floors up, a bicycle bell, the far, forgiving hush of a river that has watched everything and remains. His hands, once tuned to urgency, now hold ease with equal skill. If he is asked what changed history, he will speak not of machines or mirrors, but of a practice. Again and again, choose the act that leaves the room warmer. The war has ended, not perfectly, not cleanly, but ended. A new era is beginning. uncertain, like all eras, but tender with possibility. The city exhales. The lamp in the attic burns lower, then steadies, then rests. And in the long, quiet corridor between wakefulness and sleep, you can feel it. The world turning softly, the future arriving on careful feet, the past folding itself like a map and slipping into a pocket where it will be carried, remembered, learned from, and at last set gently down. There is a truth that arrives only when the noise has faded. War opens the darkest and the brightest rooms of the human heart. It reveals what fear can do and what care can do. It shows us how fragile we are, and then, unexpectedly, how resilient. In the long echo after the sirens, people learn to speak a quieter language, the language of blankets and bread, of cups set at the right temperature, of songs sung softly enough to let the smallest child keep sleeping. From that language, a different strength grows. Not the strength that forces doors, but the strength that holds them open. Not the strength that breaks, but the strength that repairs. If you listen closely, that strength has a sound. It sounds like a kettle rising toward a gentle boil, like a pencil tracing a name in the margin of a map, like the small, precise click of a radio key pressed with care. It sounds like a nurse tying a bandage with the knot that will not slip, like shoes set quietly by a door so as not to wake the house, like breathing. Yours, mine, ours, slow and steady in the room that has finally learned rest. The stories we have just crossed. Adam with his patient code, Marta with her hands that can listen, Anya with her proud cats and paper birds, Thomas with his miles and his pencil nub, are not large in the museum sense. They would fit into a single drawer. They could be missed by anyone looking only for machines or famous names. And yet, they are the fibers that kept a century from tearing completely. They are the evidence that even in violent weather, people found ways to warm what could be warmed. Tonight, in a quieter age, we inherit their discipline. We inherit it not as a burden, but as a simple practice. Again and again, choose the act that leaves the room warmer. It can be very small. Straighten the blanket, turn down the volume, share the last piece of bread, write the note that says, "I am here." These are not gestures that change maps. They change something closer, the temperature of a moment. And enough moments, tended well, become a climate. War made this lesson vivid by removing what was comfortable. It showed how precious a still night can be when stillness is rare. It taught people to sleep in stations and cellars and to measure wealth in sips and crumbs. It taught them, too, that mercy is never trivial. A sip at the right time is not small. A crumb at the right time is not small. A song at the right time is a bridge. Now, much later, we close our eyes in rooms that hold familiar shapes, chairs and books, a bedside lamp, the soft rectangle of a screen going dark. We hear not sirens, but the murmurs of modern life, a distant car, a hallway elevator, the hum inside the walls. We can let gratitude enter here without ceremony. Someone, once, kept watch so that this ordinary night could be ordinary. Someone guarded a station. Someone mended a wire. Someone carried a child down a staircase that trembled and then pretended not to. The quiet we fall asleep to is made of their decisions. Breathe in and out. Let the comparison soften, not sharpen. The past is not here to accuse the present of ease. It is here to teach our ease how to be grateful, to stand at the window for a moment and notice the absence of searchlights, to hear in the silence between street sounds, the echo of music once played underground, to treat a glass of water as if it were the first and last of the day, and then to drink slowly. In this gratitude, there is a second lesson. Vigilance can be gentle. Memory is a kind of watch kept without harshness. We remember not to reopen wounds, but to keep the stitches supple. We remember to notice when voices grow too loud. We remember to choose the patient road when impatience seems faster. We remember that dignity, yours, mine, ours, is maintained in small courtesies. Please, thank you, after you, sleep well. It is easy to imagine history as a series of giants pushing one another across a board. But if you tilt the board, a quieter image appears. The countless hands that steadied cups, repaired roofs, tuned radios, pruned gardens, lifted violins, turned pages, carried coal. Those hands made a different kind of map, one of passageways inside ordinary days. When the world shook, people walked those passageways to each other. You can feel them even now. In the way a city lowers its voice at midnight. In the way apartment windows glow like low constellations. In the way strangers soften their steps in a hallway after dark. In the way you slow your breath so that someone beside you can sleep. For us, a peaceful bedtime is often assumed. We tidy the pillows, turn the lamp, set the alarm. We expect morning. For millions then, morning was a question, not a guarantee. The difference is not meant to weigh on you. It is meant to lighten you. Because when you recognize the gift, you use it differently. You savor the exhale that ends the day. You let the mind unclench its fist. You let the shoulders slope, the jaw loosen, the eyes rest. You grant yourself the mercy that others once granted one another under earth and ash and echo. It helps to picture the sky. Imagine Europe on a night in 1945 when, for the first time in years, the sky belonged only to weather and stars. The searchlights had folded their long white arms. The blackout curtains were being unpinned. Windows learned how to glow again, then learned how to dim by choice. In the villages, the bell towers chimed without needing to warn. In the cities, people stepped out of doorways and looked up, hands in pockets, heads tilted back, as if they were tasting something. The darkness was real darkness, no beams cutting it into pieces. And in that darkness, the stars were not symbols or signals. They were simply patient lights, very old, very steady. You can stand under that sky from here. Close your eyes and let the room darken a little more. See the long avenues emptied of urgency. See the river shouldering past its bridges with a calmer muscle. Think of a station platform where the last concert has ended and the musician is packing the violin into its case with the reverence of returning a bird to its nest. Think of a courtyard where a gramophone plays a waltz that remembers scratches as part of the rhythm. Think of a child, perhaps Anya, folding one more paper bird, not out of defiance now, but out of habit and joy, and sending it on a lazy arc that ends in laughter. Breathe in and out. Count the breath the way Adam counted spaces between words. 1, 2, 3. The room remembers. The furniture settles. The day loosens its knot. Somewhere, someone washes a cup and sets it upside down to dry, same as people have done in every era where peace was possible. This continuity is a comfort. The past is not a foreign country if you listen for its ordinary sounds. War declared its power with drums. Peace declares its power with quiet. Quiet is not an absence. It is a presence. The presence of safety enough to sleep, of time enough to soften, of trust enough to close your eyes, and release the need to watch. Quiet says, your turn to rest. Someone, somewhere, is keeping a different kind of watch. The gentle one that requires only kindness and patience. If you like, place a small vow behind your rib cage, where vows stay warm. Tomorrow, choose one act that leaves a room warmer. It might be a message sent at the right moment. It might be a seat offered, a story told, a silence kept. It might be the way you turn the lamp so its light is kind. It might be the way you set your phone face down and let your attention be present for someone who needs it. These are stitches. They hold. And now, the sky. Return to it. It is 1945 and utterly itself. Wide, dark, simple. The moon is a patient coin. The constellations are clear, unbroken by smoke or beams. Windows blink out one by one, not because of orders, but because people are going to bed. The last tram sighs into its depot. A baker turns on an oven for morning bread. The first heat of tomorrow arrives in the last minutes of today. Somewhere, a radio that has delivered 1,000 worries whispers a slow piece of music and then clicks to rest. In the open air, a vine climbs a wall a little further than yesterday. Life does what life does when it is allowed. Let that image be the final page of tonight's story. A continent under a dark, peaceful sky, learning how to sleep again. The human pulse slowing to its natural tempo. The cities holding one another in a net of windows and courtyards and steps and kitchens. The past settling like a map, folded neatly into a pocket. The future arriving quietly on careful feet. And here you are, breathing, safe enough to rest. The night outside your window is only night. The stars, seen or unseen, are doing their patient work. Let your shoulders fall. Let the breath lengthen. Let the mind drift, softer, slower, toward the shore where sleep stands waiting with open hands. In and out. You are warm, and the world is quiet. The room is a little warmer because you are in it. Now, gently, let go. Let the story dim now, like a lamp turned low. Night outside the window, night within the room. Darkness soft and friendly, the kind that listens. Stars, seen or unseen, steady in their places. Silence, not empty, but full of rest. In and out. Slowly, in and out. Feel the bed receive your weight, kindly. Feel the pillow cradle the shape of your thoughts, asking for nothing. Your jaw loosens. Your shoulders slope. Your hands grow warm and quiet. In and out. Count the breath, softly, the way a distant bell might count the hour. 1 and 2. In and out. Let images return, but lighter now. A small lamp glowing like a quiet moon. A paper bird gliding 1 second longer than expected. A station platform after music. The hush like velvet. A courtyard vine climbing. Leaf by small leaf, toward morning. Nothing to solve. Nothing to hold. Only to drift. In and out. Let the forehead smooth. Let the space behind the eyes grow spacious and cool. Tongue relaxing, resting on the floor of the mouth. The breath moves like a tide at night, sure of itself. Imagine the sky in 1945. Dark, peaceful, whole. Searchlights folded, windows soft, stars patient as old friends. That same sky stretches above you now, a blanket of quiet. It asks only this: rest, in and out. With each exhale, the day loosens another knot. With each inhale, calm arrives a little closer to the center. In and out. If a thought comes, let it be a small boat passing on a slow river. You need not board. You may watch it drift away, unhurried, unneeded. There is time. There is ease. In and out. Feel the ankles soften, the calves grow heavy, the knees floating in comfort, the thighs warm and steady, hips sink, supported. Belly softens, back unwinds, shoulder blades melting like ice and sun, arms lengthening into rest, hands loose and open, as if releasing the day, neck gentle, mouth gentle, eyes floating, eyelids content, in and out. The past folds itself like a map and slips into a safe pocket. The future waits politely at the door. Only this night remains, simple and kind. If you listen, you might hear what quiet really says. You are safe enough to sleep. The stars are keeping their patient watch. The room is a little warmer because you are in it. Nothing more is required. In and out, softer now. In and out. May your breath be smooth and unbroken. May your dreams be clear water and gentle light. May your body mend what needs mending. May your mind set down what it no longer needs to carry. In and out. Let the last of wakefulness drift like mist above a calm lake. Let your boat find the softest shore. And now, the blessing. May your sleep be as peaceful as the night after a long storm. May the stories of the past turn into bright, gentle dreams. In and out. Good night.